we live in a country that we must support law enforcement, but law enforcement must support justice. The ruling in Ferguson is something that is not a wake-up call for many of us that's been woke a long time. It's a reminder to the nation to live up to the principles. And I think the president gathering all of us and young leaders today was historic, but it should not be an isolated incident.
They are the men and women who undertake the role of protecting the citizens of every village, hamlet, and city in America. They have targets drawn on their backs from too many corners. Yet as they seek to enforce the law, there are members of their force who sometimes go too far and thus leave a stain on the entire profession. And how they do their job is going to change. Welcome to MidPoint. He was an assistant chief of police in Maryland, a veteran of law enforcement, now the CEO of Metropolitan Protective Services. Derrick Parks joins us. Derrick, thank you so much for being here.
Ed, thanks for having me.
Derrick, the president has undertaken a 4-point plan to what he says to mend police community relations after Ferguson. Some of the things are body cameras, task forces, White House report on militarization. I'll get to that in a moment. But in your estimation, what needs to be done to create and recreate that bond of trust between the communities of all colors and police officers?
Well, I think the community policing piece definitely needs to be reestablished. I think the more police officers are actually in the community, walking foot beats and getting to know the public and the individuals inside the cities that they police, I think we'll have a level of understanding just with the camaraderie that will generally start to show itself when you have police officers and citizens kind of knowing each other in a way that it used to be.
Will the black community ever trust white officers? I think that's a very blunt question that is being asked right now.
Well, I think that's a very good question. The police have been used traditionally in the past to suppress and to enforce some racism laws, throughout the 50s, 60s, and some of the 70s. And it's one of those things that's just not going to turn on a dime. I think over time, the trust with more black officers joining the force and more white police officers being able to work in black communities and really being able to absorb the culture, that I think those barriers will be able to be broken. I think in a lot of urban cities, they have been broken.
Let's look at what the president is talking about here. Will 50,000 police body cameras really make a difference?
This is the thing. Police body cameras can make a difference because when you're on camera and always under the microscope, you always have a subconscious understanding that you're being constantly recorded and constantly videotaped. So you will kind of more or less adhere to what the practices and policies and try to be on your best behavior to a certain degree. But, the thing is, some police officers, I'm not saying whether they're black or white, use certain levels of force, not through what should I say, the use of force continuum. Some police officers are scared and they feel as though this is the way.
Okay, but wait a minute. Let me jump on that real quick here. Are they scared simply because the criminals themselves are sometimes better armed than the cops?
It just depends on the circumstances, but sometimes, in our books that we've been taught that cowardliness is not a reason to use particular level of force, meaning that you're afraid to get into a confrontation, so you use the maximum force at your disposal. Cowardliness is not a reason to use a level of deadly force, if you will.
Do you think Darren Wilson was a coward?
I'm not calling Darren Wilson a coward. I wasn't in his shoes. I was not on the scene of the time of this particular situational incident, but I've seen several incidents that have taken place where other means may have been available to use opposed to deadly force. If this officer felt as though his life was being threatened to a degree that this level of force was needed to be executed at the time, then that was his call. But we do know, we have been taught that distance equals safety in law enforcement.
I have about 20 seconds left. Do you agree with the findings of the grand jury?
I guess based on totality of the evidence that they were presented with, I guess they had no choice but to come up with the decision they did. Now, whether the prosecutor more or less moved them in a direction or not is where I believe the question should be. What I do know is when we, as police officers, our job is to neutralize the threat. So in the event that Mr. Wilson was getting his weapon taken or he was accosted in his vehicle and he used deadly force in his vehicle, and once that suspect starts to flee, we have an obligation to...
And I'm going to have to stop it there, unfortunately, Derrick, because we are all out of time. Thanks so much for joining us. We will revisit this and do it again. Stay with us.